World War I was at the height of trench warfare. Soldiers advanced across open fields and died in large numbers under machine gun and heavy artillery fire. The solution was to dig trenches. They provided protection, allowed positions to be held, and enabled the organization of attacks, even if slow and risky. It was in this context that the first tanks appeared in 1916 on the Western Front. During World War II, the battlefield witnessed the peak of tank battles. The Soviet T-35, created in the 1930s by Nikolai Astrov, drew attention with its multiple turrets and different weapons, but its enormous size and mechanical complexity made it slow and prone to breakdowns. During Operation Barbarossa, many barely reached the battlefield before stopping due to mechanical failures. The Char B-1 was a heavy French tank developed in the late 1930s, designed to attack fortifications and withstand enemy fire. It had relatively thick armor for its time and a 75mm gun in the front turret, but it was not as effective as it seemed. The Panzerkampfwagen. I was a light German tank, created more for training and tactical experimentation than actual combat. With minimal armor and two 7.92mm machine guns, it could hardly face other tanks or fortifications. Another example was the M3 Lee, an American medium tank created to compensate for the lack of powerful guns, but its design had serious flaws. The 75mm gun was fixed on the side of the turret, while a machine gun rotated on a separate turret. This complicated maneuvers, limited firing range, and left the tank vulnerable to flanking attacks. Tall and conspicuous, it became an easy target. Used in the North African campaign, it faced German Panzer III and IV tanks. Although its gun could penetrate some enemy armor, poor mobility and aiming greatly reduced its effectiveness. Although not a tank, the Gustav gun made the list of World War II failures. Created by Krupp, its purpose was to destroy extremely resistant fortifications, such as the Maginot Line, and later during the siege of Sevastopol. It weighed 1,350 tons, measured 155 feet, and fired shells of up to 15,400 pounds over 25 miles. It could demolish bunkers and entire buildings. The problem, mounted on rails, it took days to set up and required thousands of soldiers to operate and protect. Its mobility was practically zero, it was too expensive and vulnerable to air attacks. A gigantic, powerful weapon, but practically useless on the modern battlefield. During the siege of Sevastopol, the impractical Gustav gun shared space with some of the war's most problematic tanks. The Soviet T-26 was a light, slow tank with thin armor and a 37mm gun or machine guns, ideal for infantry combat, but any German artillery or tank would destroy it quickly. It was widely used in the defense of Sevastopol, but suffered heavy losses. The BT was fast, with revolutionary suspension that allowed high speed on roads, but had weak armor and unreliable engines. This made it vulnerable in rough terrain or under heavy fire. In the siege, its speed offered little advantage because the combat was static. The Panzer 35T, originally Czech, had thin armor and a 37mm gun. It was useful at the start of the war, but during the siege of Sevastopol, it showed fragility against any fortification or heavier Soviet tank. The Panzer 38T was slightly better than the 35T in armor and mobility, but still fragile in direct combat. During the Battle of Stalingrad, several Panzer 38 tanks remained idle for months, covered in straw for protection against the cold. During this time, rats used the straw as shelter and chewed electrical cables, rendering many tanks inoperable precisely when they were needed on the battlefield. Only 30 out of 100 were operational at the crucial moment. When talking about the worst tanks, context must be considered. It is obvious that a World War I tank would not fare well in World War II. Our evaluation is based on context and the urgency for a particular battle. In 1941, New Zealand and Australia found themselves in trouble. The Japanese advance in the Pacific left them unprepared. With insufficient tanks and no help from Britain, they improvised. The Caterpillar D8 agricultural tractor received armor plating made of corrugated manganese and was armed with 6 Bren machine guns. The 127-horsepower diesel engine limited its speed to 9 miles per hour, and the internal space was so cramped that a shooter had to lie on top of the engine to fire. Bob Semple's tank was heavy, unstable, and difficult to operate. The turret had no hatch, the transmission required the operator to stop to change gears, and the engine vibrated so much that it jammed the weapons. Despite everything, it participated in parades to boost morale and is remembered as the worst tank in history, but it was an example of improvisation in the face of scarcity. Beyond these examples, there were tank projects that never left the drawing board. One example was the jumping tank, conceived in Britain, intended to literally jump over obstacles, craters, or trenches using springs or pistons. In theory, it would solve mobility problems on uneven terrain. In practice, the vehicle's weight made it impossible to achieve an efficient jump without destroying the structure. The impact of landing would certainly destroy the tank and its crew. The Landkreuz P-1000 represented the pinnacle of German ambition for supertanks during World War II. Planned in 1942 by Krupp, it weighed over 1,000 tons, measured 115 feet in length, and had warship-inspired armament, including a 280mm gun and multiple machine guns. It would have been an invincible mobile fortress. In practice, it would have been impossible to transport, would destroy roads and bridges, require thousands of soldiers to operate, and consume fuel like an entire city. To make matters worse, its size made it an easy target for airstrikes. The flying tank was even more extreme. Engineers imagined vehicles capable of taking off or gliding over obstacles. With the technology of the time, this was impossible. No engine, fuel, or structure could support the weight of a tank in the air. Even if it managed to lift off, the landing would destroy the vehicle and crew. All that existed were conceptual drawings and miniature prototypes, extreme engineering ideas with no chance of becoming reality. Among other projects, the Sphere tank emerged as an attempt to create an armored vehicle, almost impossible to hit, capable of rolling across uneven terrain like a giant ball. The idea was that the spherical shape would disperse enemy projectiles and allow the tank to move in any direction easily. Some designs included a central rotating turret with a gun and small machine guns around it for defense against infantry. In reality, the Sphere tank was completely unfeasible. The unstable center of gravity made control nearly impossible. The crew would be cramped in a tiny space, and the armor required to protect them would make the vehicle too heavy to move. No functional model went beyond miniature prototypes or conceptual drawings, and it was never used in combat. Thank you for watching, and if you liked it, leave a like and subscribe.